The steps of the imperial palace were flanked by Liu Bei's finest soldiers, replacing the imperial guards they had slain on the road from Shanyang. Down them came the Son of Heaven, descending towards Liu Bei in the courtyard. Behind the caretaker was an assembly of thousands, all the leading figures of the capital districts. They watched as Liu Bei received the emperor's blessing, and in a long ceremony beside an altar was elevated to the rank of duke. Now this sandal weaver could execute his old peers on a whim, and indeed claim any sandals they made as his own. But it was not just commoners he rose above. Emperor Shan declared that Liu Bei was to inherit Dong Zhuo's post as Prime Minister of the Han, the highest office in the empire. That was not so unusual given the circumstances. However, in the days that followed, the scholars of the land could not help but notice that the powers usurped by that office were not being returned to the imperial court. Addressing this body on the matter, Liu Bei said, "Friends, it is a long-held tradition that the emperor be advised by a body of loyal and able servants, and in this way the Han has lasted 20 generations. But they had another responsibility, to protect the Son of Heaven. In this age, the officials have suffered great indignities and can hardly afford their own security. Yet warlords across the land raise armies and conquer fiefs like they were empires themselves. Who could dare suggest that the former is employed to shield the Han above the latter? Furthermore, how can armies so used to serving under my banner be asked to submit to others so easily? Would the most harmonious thing not be to have those same armies simply serve the empire through me? Taking that into consideration, that total authority over matters of state should reside with the Prime Minister is the natural fit. When the fit ails, it shall be abolished. When it benefits heaven and earth alike, it must be embraced." Only one man dared step out of the rows of officials to make a response. It was a well-known writer and thinker from Jing province, a man named Zhu Shu. "Lord Prime Minister, I welcome your well-reasoned arguments. The restoration of peace is more akin to the blooming of a flower than the lighting of a candle. To ask it be only momentary is as foolish as shouting at a plum sapling for not bearing fruit. However, the imperial court serves a particularly vital function in times of unchecked ambition. By sharing power with the other great men of the land, the court is able to avoid a sense of injustice among those with means and cunning. Why not delegate some of the Prime Minister's mandate to the great warlords so that they need not question whether they are to be considered a part of our newly hatched empire?" Liu Bei was unsure how to turn Zhu Shu down. Then he saw Zhao Yun glaring at Zhu Shu indignantly. Thinking of why this could be, he realized there was something Zhu Shu had missed that only true Han loyalists would appreciate. "That will not be necessary, Master Shu. What question is there for these warlords to answer? They were tasked by the imperial house with putting down rebels. The Yellow Turbans and the traitor Dong both fit the bill. That so many others were implicated in the corruption was most worrying, but now that the pool of heaven is stilled, we can attend to such things in the proper fashion. In essence, the great men of the land serve the empire now just as they always have. If they are not loyal enough to end their missions as eagerly as they started, then why reward that selfish ambition with rank and power? It should be quite the opposite. In this way, the empire will be purged of every Dong Zhuo, and the Son of Heaven's reign will be as spring follows winter." Zhu Shu was wise enough to not deliver his next reply, and withdrew. However, for his courage in speaking up, Liu Bei promoted him to imperial strategist and set him to work examining the troops. Once all the ceremonies were done at the capital, said capital was entirely moved. With the traditional site at Luoyang surrounded by warlords, Liu Bei moved Emperor Shan to reside in Donghai on the east coast. On the way, all the commoners living along the road turned out to kneel before the lively, colourful procession. They took little persuasion, for seeing their supreme leader's carriage was rarer even than a once-in-a-lifetime chance. While they were celebrating along the highways, Liu Bei's troops stalked the deserted towns and confiscated any weapons or seditious writings they could find. Word got ahead of the column that this was taking place, and strangely they ceased to find anything out of order in the later regions. Liu Bei remained at the court in Chang'an, receiving guests and visitors from across the empire, pledging loyalty, presenting gifts, and reciting long, eloquent bouts of praise. The myriad officials who had not the conviction to rebel against Dong Zhuo kowtowed and grovelled before their new prime minister. Liu Bei originally planned to audit these men like a cook cutting mould from bread, but there was to be no opportunity. Yuan Shu, Emperor Zhong, could tolerate his servitude no longer. The man resolved to realize his ambition or die trying. The many folk of his realm across northern Jing were handed this task, and hence a new civil war broke out. Before Liu Bei could prepare his troops, the first news of fighting arrived. The forests south of Luoyang were overrun by an army under General Huang Gai, one of the heroes who had distinguished himself against the Yellow Turbans and Dong Zhuo. "I have heard of Huang Gai," Liu Bei said to Chu Shu. "Isn't he a veteran of countless campaigns serving the emperor? How did he end up in the hands of the rat Yuan Shu?" "That is simple. He was a general under the late governor Sun Jian of the Southlands. He was captured by Yuan Shu's lackeys while searching for his lord's stolen corpse near Shakou. Thinking Lord Yuan might actually help him, he went along. But alas, he knew little Yuan Shu's temperament, and so while Huang Gai agreed to perform deeds to earn aid, it was all for naught. Even with the promise broken, Huang Gai is a man of honor who does not go back on his word. Thus, he serves a traitor only that he might die without being called one himself. When good men are ensnared by the bad, it is like putting a lamp at the bottom of a well. Strategist Chu, can I task you with rescuing him? Though he is a great man, and I a mere common practitioner, I will make every effort, my lord." Chu Shu went to Yingchuan in Yu province, the nearest city to Huang Gai's army, and the current base of the Liu army under Xiahou Dun. Meanwhile, Liu Bei, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei and Zhao Yun all quit Chang'an to race southeast to Jing province. Chu Shu advised Xiahou Dun place an ambush on the main road outside Yingchuan. This was done, but no army came along it. Then they received news that Huang Gai was already behind them. "So he knew better than to take the main road," Chu Shu mused. "Now that he is behind us, we shall have to attack at once." "Simple," Xiahou Dun said. "He must have driven his men like racing horses to get behind us so quickly. I will go raid his camp tonight while his men are out cold. How can they resist?" "General Xiahou, you think a man who knew not to take the main road also does not know that we would think of attacking tonight. Do not underestimate Huang Gai." "So what do you suggest?" "Huang Gai is known for his chivalry. He knows that we shall come, so he will not encamp at all. He seeks pitched battle, on any terms we impose, midnight or midday. We must gather up all the lanterns we can and depart. I dare say he's waiting for us on Red Blossom Ridge right now." "Fine. What is an enemy if they do not want to fight? I'll see this chivalry for myself." Xiahou Dun led his army towards Huang Gai, and sure enough his men were resting along a ridge, organized in a rough formation. As Xiahou Dun approached, they sprang to their feet and were at once ready for battle. Caring little for this, Xiahou Dun rode right up to their lines and shouted for Huang Gai. Huang Gai rode out, spear in hand, and after a few bouts, both he and Xiahou Dun had been unhorsed. "General Huang, I've heard you fight for a cause that you have no allegiance to. How did an able man like yourself allow such a thing?" Xiahou Dun asked. "You cannot mock me with such words," Huang Gai replied. "I have kept my earliest vows. Few can say the same, least of all you. Because a vow one day means dishonor on another. And so why do you still risk death for your lord?" "That's what I came to ask you." "Because you have no answer. Do not presume anything of me, old man." "Oh, you are an interesting one." Saying this, Huang Gai suddenly dropped his spear and stood up straight, staring at Xiahou Dun. Xiahou hesitated, then gave an exasperated sigh. He knocked Huang Gai over with the butt of his spear. Huang Gai looked up at him with a smile. "Let's both do our duties, huh? It'll do us both good, won't it?" He pulled off his helmet and stretched his neck out, saying nothing else. Xiahou was fuming with anger at this display, but did not act. Then a few riders arrived on the scene. Their leader jumped from his horse and attacked Xiahou with savage energy, while the others dragged Huang Gai away. This was Wang Dun, Huang Gai's second in command. He ran out of breath quickly, and when Xiahou feinted a stab towards his stomach, he couldn't react. The spear burst out of his back, and was then withdrawn with a dismissive grunt from its wielder. Even with one leader carried away and another dead, the Yuan army still waited on the ridge. Xiahou waved his spear. Far behind him, the lanterns were lit and his army flickered into view. Jian Yong and Xu Shu brought them up to attack the ridge, expecting little resistance. That was not the case. Lines of shields and spears held firm at the top of the slope, and the Liu men were pelted with arrows, incendiaries, and even rocks from catapults. Indeed, Huang Gai had predicted the site and time of the battle precisely, and was well prepared. Xiahou burst through the Yuan defences and cut the tension lines on one of the catapults. With an explosion of splinters, its main beam was cracked in two, obliterating its base and showering nearby troops with debris. Yet they fought on, with Xiahou at their centre and Liu troops pressing them from all sides. Just as the fight seemed to be going in Xiahou favour, more troops would emerge from hidden spots along the wooded ridgeline and relieve their comrades. Xu Shu struggled forwards to advise Xiahou to retreat, but the idea was dismissed. Thus the two armies fought through the night, first by lantern light, then by moonlight as oils and wicks were expended. Finally, the Yuan troops conceded the ridge, and their withdrawal was turned into a rout. After such a long, stubborn battle, Xiahou did not feel like being chivalrous. He pursued and killed almost the entire Yuan army, foot soldiers and nobles alike. But Huang Gai himself had long slipped away. The Yuan insurrection appeared to have been quashed, but in truth, Emperor Zhong's main assault was yet to come. He had troops and ships moving down the Yangtze River in the south. By securing this avenue of approach to Liu Bei's lands, they could quickly emerge to the south of Shu province and march to the emperor at Donghai long before help could arrive. With a knife at the young emperor's throat, how could Liu Bei refuse anything Yuan Shu demanded? There was only a single naval base in Lujiang Commandery that could block such a move. It was staffed by the former rebel Zhang Chao and Tong Yurei's stone-faced handmaiden Pang Jushang, two officers swept into the service of their enemies by an inescapable tide. As proven generals like Xiahou and Zhao Yun helped their lord push back against Yuan Shu in the north, these two rebels watched hundreds of ships approach their isolated bastion. The Yuan generals expected to receive a surrender, but it was not even discussed. Zhang Chao refused to treat with them, denouncing all as rebels. Enraged, the Yuan army was ordered to attack as soon as they arrived at Zhang Chao's base. They awaited an easy win, not expecting much of a fight from these prisoners-turned-soldiers, but they had misread the situation entirely. Such things were clear when Zhang Chao charged out of the base with a few of his remaining clan warriors. He cut forward through the Yuan ranks, slaying captains and felling banners as easily as a marksman scores an unwary pheasant. Indeed, a man who once had much and now has little, treasures that little like the last trickles of a stream in drought. Zhang Chao could scarcely allow his few remaining men-at-arms to be harmed. Likewise, who has more to prove than an outcast living in a great shadow? One victory could change everything, but for a seasoned warrior, the same is true of one defeat. Thus, only an outcast can reason courage from despair. Thanks to Zhang Chao's chaotic charge, the attack on the Liu base became muddled. The bulk of the Yuan troops tried to force their way through a single entrance, and were halted by Pang Jushang's troops. The horsemen tried to find a way in elsewhere, but spearmen were waiting for them. Those riders that lived fled the field. With this, the base was far from overrun, and instead was contested with a great brawl at the northern gate. The Yuan troops were more numerous and carried finer weapons than their opponents. They expected victory, and did not expect to see Pang Jushang herself lop off their commander's head with an axe, but the latter course of events played out plainly before their eyes. Seeing this also, 2 Yuan officers came up with a plan. They rode at full pelt into the fight, and barreled right on through to escape the other side. Pang Jushang spurred her horse on and raised her axe again. Fleeing deeper into the base, the Yuan officers called for their soldiers to fight through and rescue them. Obeying this command passionately, the Yuan soldiers died by the hundred trying to gain entry themselves, and in turn the Liu troops died in equal numbers, trapped in that lonely redoubt. Those daring officers eventually realized that their rescue was not forthcoming, but Pang Jushang was. Her swinging axe claimed both of their lives after a long chase, and when she presented their heads to the fading melee at the gate, the Yuan survivors finally withdrew. It was not especially a cause for celebration, as half of the Liu army was dead, and only the vanguard of the Yuan invasion had been stopped. The main army would trickle in and reform over the coming days. For Zhang Chao and company, the best hope now was for the war to be ended, and it was not at all a forlorn hope, as on the same day as the battle in Lujiang, Liu Bei's imperial army scaled the walls of Nanyang and seized Emperor Zhong's palace. The pretender was not there, but someone else of interest was waiting to see the Prime Minister. "Prime Minister Liu, how fortunate I am to meet you at last," he said. It was Huang Gai, fresh from his defeat at Red Blossom Ridge. He introduced himself and explained perfectly honestly what had happened between him and Shahudun. Shahudun was in the city and was called up to confirm it. "This man is a true warrior, yet understands strategy also," Shahudun vouched. "I say you should have his head or his oath. I expect he will comply with either order." "The good general is correct," Huang Gai said. "I waited here to speak with Yuan Shu, but he is nowhere to be found, and instead you are here. Who could say that Yuan Shu has not broken the bond of liege and vassal? Yet I am not free of such a bond, for my duty to Lord Sun Jian is not ended. Lord Liu Bei, if you will not help me carry out my duty, then kill me quickly so that I might find my lord soon and face whatever punishment he sees fit." This display amazed Liu Bei, and without delay he had Huang Gai provided a new set of armor and a fine horse. "This is what they call a good man," Liu Bei remarked. "If everyone in the Empire was as loyal as Huang Gai, we would have no need for weapons and walls." "Where's the fun in that?" Zhang Fei said. "Brother, you would finally have time to focus on your grooming," Guan Yu suggested, to much amusement. There was still no sign of Emperor Zhong as Zhao Yun and Shahudun led armies south into Jing. Then, a messenger arrived in Nanyang requesting for Yuan Shu a place in the imperial court. Perhaps an ideologue like that Zhu Shu would accept it, Liu Bei thought. But there are men who would eat the world if only their mouth was so big. I'll pretend I never heard of this. The messenger was imprisoned, where he didn't last long, and the war continued. This was sour news for Zhang Chao. The Yuan army on the Yangtze attacked from all sides, and while his troops said nothing of it, he could not bear to let them follow him into battle. He surrendered and put himself at the mercy of the Yuan officers. These men recognized the valiance of Zhang Chao's previous defense, and so all agreed the proper thing was to allow him to march out of the base fully armed and return to Guanling. There was now limited time before Yuan Shu's men travelled the Yangtze east and bypassed Liu Bei's strongholds entirely, but such bad news arrived only after something which in fact happened later, but closer to Nanyang. The governor of Luoyang, Liu Dai, suddenly declared war on the empire. Driven mad with paranoia, and knowing that he controlled the traditional capital of the empire, he felt he had no choice but to stand up for himself in such a way. It was a fool's gambit with no substance, and Liu Bei mobilized at once to take the heaven-sent chance to secure Luoyang. Seeing Liu Bei not hesitate for a moment to attack his clansman and an appointed official of the imperial court, no less, Xu Shu decided to intervene. He knew that he had not the wisdom or influence to divert Liu Bei's enthusiasm for his new position, but there was one man who might. "Lord Liu Bei, have you heard of the twin jewels of the Empire, Master Sleeping Dragon and Master Fledgling Phoenix?" he asked. "Long have I heard these names. There was a scholar in Changyang, Master Watermirror, who spoke highly of these prodigious students. He said that whoever acquired the services of just one of these heroes would come to rule the Empire. Do you know them, Master Xu? Both are elusive, and are known closely to very few. Yet I have the privilege of having made Master Sleeping Dragon's acquaintance on several occasions. How does his ability compare to yours?" "He is like a fire-eyed mare, while I am like a dithering insect. There is no comparison. I mention him for I believe that he has recently celebrated his 18th birthday. Despite his enormous ability, he wastes time as a farmer and playing instruments outside a thatched hut in the mountains. Lord Liu Bei, will you not go and see him?" "Go? Will he not come here?" "Ah, I see you are not truly interested in his talents. Please forgive the intrusion," Xu Shu said, immediately leaving Liu Bei's chamber. Liu Bei chased him down and apologized. Then he agreed to seek Master Sleeping Dragon in person. "So, young Master Zhuge, as you always said, it will be up to you to save the Empire, after all," Xu Shu thought. What would come of Xu Shu's recommendation? Read on.